Hello, just making another YouTube video today because, I was just watching the telly in the front room in this rehab place called The Lodge, and you can see Cardiff from the beach over from Weston-super-Mare, and the digital TV thinks it's in Wales, so it gets BBC Wales, right? And they just shown this feature on the BBC about a tank company called Ajax in Merthyr Tydfil. And they talked about how they're going from spending like 2.3% of GDP to 2.5% of GDP on defence. And they're kind of gleefully rubbing their hands together that, this tank factory already creates 7,000 jobs, which is great for employment. And I do believe that, and I respect the military, and I do believe that we need a military. And I don't know, it was just sort of they said that they'd spent 900 million quid before, and now they're going to hire another 700 people with this extra defence contract if they get it. And kind of interviewed some of the apprentices and some little lad that had worked there for ages, and it was sort of all this kind of, well, this is great and optimistic. These lovely instruments of death are going to be out fighting probably illegal wars in terribly derelict, destitute countries against civilian populace who have next to no personal defence. I mean, just with what's happened with Israel and Gaza, I saw this chart the other day. It was like a military quota chart thing, right? And it was like how many tanks Israel have got, how many aircraft they've got, how many helicopter gunships they've got, how many all this shit. And it was loads of stuff on Israel's side and fuck all on the Gazan side. They don't have any aircraft or any tanks or any armoured vehicle, like anything. Do you know what I mean? They just don't have a military. And it's it just struck me as just being just so, I don't know, sort of this kind of happy clappy, let's benefit from defence spending. Increasing defence spending is a bad thing. Do you know what I mean? That we're spending more money on trying to blow people to pieces isn't something which shouldn't go without just a modicum, an iota of we accept that it is sad that we're having to, spend millions and millions of pounds on things to kill people, while there's people who die from diarrhea from not having enough clean drinking water all over the world every day. And it's not that we're not helping those people with international aid budgets. Fuck knows about the United States vetoing the ceasefire at the United Nations. I read, anyone who's read about that, I mean, just bollocks to the United States, basically. On that, at least on that much. I just, watching this news piece just really struck me. It was just sort of tanks are horrible things. I remember I went to Sand's school in Ashburton, and this guy once came from the United Nations and came to do a talk. And when I stuck my hand up and asked him a question, I asked him a question about tanks. I remember it very distinctly. I said, can you explain to me, I've seen in the Serbia and Bosnian conflicts on the TV in those days as a younger lad. I've seen quite a lot of footage of your peacekeeping tanks, your white tanks that say UN on the side, and they're supposedly there for peacekeeping. Could you please explain to me how you could possibly have a peacekeeping tank? And I don't remember his answer. I guess he gave me the answer you'd expect is that, sometimes you need to intervene in situations to neutralise a threat and kind of protect a disenfranchised, vulnerable populace against military aggression. Probably somewhere along the lines of the rational answer that I could probably answer myself if I asked myself now, and not as a 12-year-old boy, but as a soon-to-be 39-year-old. But it was just the way this BBC broadcast. I'm not shitting on the BBC, although I do think the BBC are quite shit a bit. Well, I think they're more than a bit shit. They've done some fantastic quality journalism over the last 15, 20 years. It's really benefited me and intellectually stimulated me. And I've been not massively entertained, but I've been well informed, and for that I'm incredibly grateful. I'd love to work for the BBC one day, but I I just couldn't really get past this kind of just sanctimonious, kind of acrimonious glee that was just plastered all over this news report. It's like the fact that we're buying more tanks and we're building more tanks is really sad. Like, those tanks are going to take away men and women's lives. And that's what they're for, is for relieving, for stopping the electrical activity in your heart and and the brain of an opponent who probably, like, given most of the wars that are happening, I don't know. I mean, I don't know much about Russia and Ukraine. I guess I'm kind of looking at it very much in a Gazan point of view. But it's just like the way that they just said, well, 900 million quid, extra jobs, 700 jobs, putting Merthyr Tydfil back on the map, and like, I'm sure if I grew up in Merthyr Tydfil and I had no fucking prospects, and I wanted to not be a fucking crack and heroin dealer or a prostitute, and I wanted to go and find decent employment opportunities with my degree that I'd just got myself 30 grand in debt to do, like, I'd probably consider working for a defence company. It's not that they're like morally wrong, but it was just the attitude. It's just the kind of intonation that goes with it. Like, there was not a shred of sort of like, whilst it's unfortunate that we have to spend more on military spending to profligate war and subjugation and, the violent, agonising, harrowing deaths of people in ditches after they've just been shelled and, blown up by grenades and bullets and, crushed under buildings. It's great that we're creating jobs. We're increasing the workforce. We're keeping the wolf from the door for all these people. And isn't that brilliant? Exciting times ahead. And here's the weather. It was, and like, I respect the military. Like, I'd like the military to come and fucking save me on more than one occasion. There's been situations where if the SAS had just turned up, kicked down a few doors and pointed some guns at some people, then, I would have been a very, very, very happy boy, and I would have, given them all a fucking medal. And, the police, certainly, it's situations I've been in that's way above the pay grade of the police. The police, the best will in the world, aren't going to come and save me in some of the times of, circumstances I've been in my life. It's only the military that ever would. And for me to sit there and say, well, fucking defence contract spending's bad, I'm some sort of bleeding heart liberal that doesn't think that we need good kit for our boys who sacrifice their lives in the military. It's not that. Like, it's, even a guy in the army, I would hope, would be like, increased defence spending isn't really a good thing. Increased defence spending is sad. It's depressing. It's an unfortunate thing that we have to spend more money on instruments of death to relieve people of their lives in situations where we can't reach a diplomatic solution using, intellect and kind of interoperable collaboration. And I don't know, I had a shit day today. I made a couple of YouTube videos, got a missed call from a private number. If you're trying to phone me from a private number, leave me a voicemail and then I can phone you back in it. But if you don't leave me a voicemail, I don't know who the fuck you are. Don't fucking care probably either. It's probably just someone who is a twat. But I just, we're watching BBC Wales alone in the lounge at the Lodge, Kew, Stoke Weston-super-Mare. Just saw this thing about this Ajax factory, and I don't disrespect any people who work there, and I don't disrespect the company, I don't disrespect the government, I don't disrespect the military. I just think that the way that we look at it, like, as a society, our consciousness, people get their opinions from the TV. And if we're, to be pro-peace and anti-war is kind of on brand for Britain. Do you know what I mean? I think there's this sort of like the patriotism and the kind of like emblematic enshrining of the logos and the kind of eternal honour that we pay to our servicemen is warranted, but it's like they don't sort of, you don't, you know, there's lots of veterans charities, there's lots of kind of like places for people to rehabilitate themselves, and, you know, glorious pensioners in wheelchairs shaking King Charles' hands, you know, after serving in the war, you know, who are still trucking, and, you know, still remember vividly how scary it was and how much they lost they missed the brothers that they've lost, you know. But it's just like, even if people in the military, in the special boat service and the merchant navy and the SAS and the infantry, the grenadiers, you know, I'd expect them all to be pro peace. Do you know what I mean? Like I'd expect them to be like, we don't want to go to war. If we could all be out the job, wouldn't that be ace? Wouldn't it be brilliant if we didn't need a military? Like, wouldn't it be brilliant if no one had to get blown up by fucking IEDs in Helmand province, or nobody had to, you know, get shot by a sniper in Ukraine, or like whichever side of the, like, military people are kind of, we always honour our military, but we don't promote peace. We don't sort of, you don't see within the vernacular of ex-military staff and serving military members that there's like a drive for, like, let's not have a war in the first place. Should we try and work things out instead of having a war? Because in war, everyone just dies. Loads of people die. And as they come back, you know, we all wear our poppy. I bought a poppy badge, you know, for Remembrance Sunday this year, and I wore it for a bit, and, you know, I've still got it somewhere. And I bought that because there was a guy stood in the street, and it was like, I was just going to buy this phone that I'm recording this on. And I saw him stood there, and I said, "There's a £5, mate, keep the change, and, you know, I'll give us one of your poppies." And, you know, I was really grateful for that kind of exchange. It felt really right, and it felt really honourable to be supporting the Royal British Legion, you know. I liked doing it, and I felt good about it. I was proud to wear it, but you know, if the Royal British Legion could have a dove, a symbol of peace, instead of a symbol of bloodshed and remembrance as part of its brand, you know, if we as a military nation and you know, a military superpower and an economic superpower within the Western world could promote and engender an attitude of peace, you know, of anti-war rhetoric, you know, of collaborative debate and international agreement, compromise, you know, progressive stuff, like, I think that would be a lot more on brand for those people who have paid the ultimate price and those people who aren't around anymore, so that we can be free. So they tell us, I mean, reading this this book, how many chapters, I'm not really very far through it, about neoliberalism, and it does sort of hark back to you know, the IMF and the World Bank, and you know, there's a lot of people who've got bad stuff to say about the Council on Foreign Relations and the Trilateral Commission, and, you know, the Bank of International Settlements. And I'd like to do a PPE one day, maybe, and so I could, you know, ramble and know what I'm talking about. But I just saw this thing on the news, and I thought I'd make a quick YouTube video about it. It was 15 minutes long now, so yeah. But, you know, whatever you do it for peace, man. Don't glorify war. You know, don't make the business of war, you know, and the pride of having paid a sacrifice, you know, the sort of sanctification of martyrdom, you know, some kind of substitute for the motivation to achieve peace and harmony, collaboration, international agreement, you know, things which prevent wars from starting in the first place and prevent people from losing their lives in the first place. You know, I think that's, like, the BBC there wasn't, an iota of kind of, whilst it's unfortunate that we are having to expand our military due to global threats and, conflagrations around the world which require our support, to 2.5% of GDP. It's like, and we hope we win these contracts, and it would be great for Wales if we won these contracts. 700 new jobs and new investment. Things are looking up. Things are on. There's footage of these tanks like cruising around, and it's like they've got, they're just brutal. Tanks are the most brutal things. They're just absolutely deadly, vicious. Like my brother Connor had a friend who, in the summer of 2024, like in the spring of 2024, was chatting to him on WhatsApp, and he kind of, my brother had to sort of sever ties with him because he was like in the IDF. He was a mate of his who was Jewish. He knew from Bristol, and he got called up to go and fight, give up back in Israel. He was an Israeli guy, and like my brother was playing me these voice messages, and he was like really torn and heartbroken because he was just like, I can't believe the vitriol and the kind of the sort of satisfactory moral gravitas that this dude in the IDF is sending me in these voice messages. He's like, we just, destroyed a whole housing estate today. We destroyed 10 houses. We blew the fuck out of them and built, and bulldozed them. Now we'll see who's going to be the winner. Ha ha ha. And it's like, Connor, my brother, was just he's not got an aggressive bone in his body. He's always been a really gentle, affectionate, and intelligent guy, and like he doesn't like confrontation or aggression at all. And he's not, he's great at Call of Duty, but he's not a wary person at all. Like, and he's always, we do gardening together, and he's forever, only because he's learned behaviour. He's caught with me to blow my own trumpet, but whenever he sees a bug, he'll stop what he's doing and gently collect the ant or the beetle or the butterfly or the leaf insect or whatever, and just take, even if it takes 30 seconds, to just gently pick up an insect, move it over to a safe area, put it on a leaf, and wish it all the best and make sure it doesn't die. Don't tread on snails. Don't don't strim through an ant's nest. And life is precious. Every single life is precious. I've been vegetarian today. I was thinking about the guys eating sausage pasta while I had my asparagus pasta. I'm very lucky to have, food in my tummy and clothes on my back and a mobile phone to be able to make these YouTube videos. And I'm not going to be here forever. I don't know what's going to happen when I go back into the community. I'm absolutely terrified, and there's very much a warfare mentality going on. I'm in kind of survival mode mentally, and probably a bit of PTSD, a lot of PTSD, and loads of other symptoms that they don't talk about in my ward rounds. They just talk about my schizoaffective disorder, and just be an advocate of peace. Don't glorify war. If we do have to go to war, then God forbid anybody gets hurt, and let's hope that, people in tanks can be going to build bridges and roads and schools and hospitals in destitute parts of Africa that need redevelopment, like they do with a lot of military spending, and, that people who are vulnerable are supported by the protection that's offered by those tanks. But when we do talk about military spending and, military might, we should do it through a lens of, it being the least preferential option, not something which, we're going to do our level best to promote and engender honour in order to not dishonour all of our war veterans and our military service families and military service members. Because if you start saying it's a shame that they're just, spending out on military, then you're kind of shitting in somebody's cornflakes. They if they had done, like, if the BBC had done this piece on the news tonight about people feeling a little bit miffed that we're having to spend more on, instruments to relieve people of their life, I think probably they would have got complaints. Do you know what I mean? I reckon people would complain and said, my uncle, dad, father, brother, cousin, sister, niece, son, daughter gave their life fighting for this country. How dare you say that, military spending on good kit to keep them safe and, help them win wars is anything other than a godsend. How dare you, is what they would probably say. And I hope people don't say that to me. That's, I'm not suggesting that people don't deserve to be respected and honoured who've served their country, but I just think war is not good, and tanks are bad, bullets and guns are bad. They're not good things to celebrate. Yes, they create jobs. People work in factories creating nuclear weapons, but nuclear weapons are fucking horrible things. It's like absolutely mortifying, destructive force that can only ever be bad. It's never good. It's only ever a bad, unless it's a United Nations peacekeeping tank, which is a bit of a contradiction in terms. It is one. Alexa, I like this Echo Show 5 thing. Alexa, where am I now? It doesn't know. Alexa, what time is it? It's gone yellow. Fuck it. See, that's what probably pisses people off in the battlefield is when kit doesn't work like it's supposed to. The little bar's gone yellow, look. Can you see that? Gone yellow instead of blue. Don't know what that means. Answers on a postcard if anyone knows what that means. Alexa, tell me a joke.
Knock knock. Who's there? Isabel. Isabel who? Isabel not working. I rang 4 times before I knocked.
It does work. Isabel, knock knock, who's there? Isabel. Isabel who? Isabel not working. I rang 4 times before I knocked. On that bombshell, I'll try and leave you with a note of joviality, and there's not really much to be good humoured about at the moment, but yeah, death equals sadness. War is bad. Don't be happy about making more wars. Be happy about peace and spend money promoting peace and saving lives rather than promoting war and destroying lives. Thanks.